Hi everyone, this is jcovello. First, I'd like everybody to know I've never created a video for YouTube before, and I normally wouldn't. But I've been going back and forth with a YouTube username IZBO10 for about a month now about atheism and belief. And I think it's important to address some of the misinformation in his videos, especially his last two directed specifically at me. Before we get too far into it, I want to say that I don't believe that this YouTube user is dishonest. I truly think he believes what he's saying. Apparently what we have is someone who's taken a couple of logic classes, but then makes some arguments by selective observation, then makes some bad assumptions, and then draws the wrong conclusions. But please watch the video and then you could decide. I think the best place to start would be by giving you a little background. I think it's important that you understand my current religious convictions, so there's no doubt the perspective that I'm making this video from. I'm going to say by the popular definitions, I consider myself an agnostic, and by that I mean I'm not a theist, and I'm also not an atheist. Some may argue that agnostic is not a religious position, and I would certainly like to clarify why I believe it is in another video, but for right now, I'm hoping everyone will just give me a little latitude and accept that agnostic as meaning neither theist nor atheist. Debates began with IZBO10 with his position that there's no such thing as someone who is neither a theist or an atheist, and that by using formal logic that he could prove it. We began to debate back and forth, and it was clear that his logic and his Venn charts were incomplete. He had made some incorrect assumptions, and he'd drawn some incorrect conclusions. And over time he realized this, and he redrew the Venn chart and created his second video response. But while the chart was drawn better, the false assumptions and the wrong conclusions still persisted, and his definitions and logic would just about make everyone an atheist. So if you were unsure about God, you were an atheist. If you said maybe you believed in God, you were an atheist. If you never considered the question of God, you were an atheist. And believe it or not, if you believed in God and was never asked the question, guess what? You were an atheist. Well, I always learned that if your logic defies common sense, go back and check your logic, because you probably made a mistake somewhere. And it seems that's the case here, and this video is designed to set that straight. This video should be able to be understood by everyone. I tried to refrain from using formal logic definitions like modus tollens, modus ponens, and excluded middle. Really, all you should need is a very basic understanding of logic and some common sense. So, on to the definitions. First, we have believe. And what does that mean? That means you have belief. That would be the quantitative value of belief is 1. If you have belief, you're at 1. So, what is lack belief? Lack belief is not having belief. That's the quantitative value of belief is 0. That should be fairly simple. The third thing that we need to understand is what mutually exclusive means. That means simultaneously having one value means you can no longer have another value. To give you an example of that is if you flip a coin, if it comes up heads, it can no longer be tails. So, what are the two claims? The first claim is that Q, believe, is the quantitative value of your belief known to be 1. That means you're in the green circle. The second claim is R. That means lack belief. If the quantitative value of your known belief is 0, you're in the red circle. Now, it's important to understand that Q and R are mutually exclusive. In short, what that means is if you believe, quantitative value of 1, you can no longer, at the same time, have the value of belief as 0, and vice versa. If the quantitative value of your belief is 0, you can't have the belief value of 1. That's what mutually exclusive means. Now, is it possible to be in the purple-gray area in the middle, outside of the circles? The answer is yes. But to be in this purple area, you must both be not Q and not R. You can't just be not Q, you have to be both not Q and not R. The little squiggly line means not. All that really means is that you're not in the circle. Okay, that's not very hard to understand, even for a layperson. So what's the problem? The problem is, since these are mutually exclusive, they are not separate claims, and you cannot simply ignore one half of this diagram. That's what IZBO10 doesn't understand. Ignoring half the diagram is called argument by selective observation or cherry picking. There's also a lot of other names for it, ignoring the counterclaim, half-truths, half-assertions. So let's take a look and see what happens if we ignore half the diagram. Okay, so by ignoring half the diagram, your diagram looks something like this. And what IZBO does is by ignoring this counterclaim, he makes the assumption that since Q is the quantitative equivalent of 1, not Q has the quantitative value of belief equals 0. That is absolutely incorrect. That's what's known as a false assumption. So let's take a look and see what happened if we ignore this side and we just consider the counterclaim. By applying the same selective logic, by looking at this diagram, one would have to conclude if your known value of belief is 0 inside the circle, outside the red circle, the quantitative value of belief must be equal to 1. That is also a false assumption. So let's see what happens if we put these two false assumptions together. Making the assumption that not Q is equivalent to lack belief, meaning belief quantitative value of 0, and not R, not lacks belief, is equivalent to the belief quantitative value of 1, it would mean the purple area would have to be the value of both quantitative value 1 and 0 at the same time, which we know is impossible. Also, by stating not Q is equivalent to lacks belief, it implies that we know the value lacks belief, making Q equal to R, and that is just not the case. This is a very common error for someone who really doesn't understand logic. It's called affirming the consequent. In any case, it's clear that it's impossible to separate the two claims. So what's really going on here? To understand, you must first understand what not Q actually represents. This is another place IZBO10 really doesn't understand the underlying concept. So if not Q doesn't mean lack of belief, what does it actually mean? Well, it means exactly as it sounds. It means not Q. It means Q has not been affirmed. That's not the same as lacks belief. Similarly, not R is just the non-affirmation of lacks belief. So then, what's the purple zone? In short, it is the non-affirmation of Q and the non-affirmation of R, or simply neither Q nor R, or no value. And another name for no value is null, or as I like to call it, U, for uncertain. So there you have it. The logic behind belief in terms anyone can understand. So in conclusion, I'm going to say, while it's nice to know the names of some concepts, like modus tollens and excluded middle, it's equally important, if not more important, that you understand the underlying concepts and apply the logic correctly. To not make arguments using selective observations, to not make assumptions, and to not misconstrue what not really means. Well, that concludes this video. Thank you.